The Cricket in Times Square, Week 3. Chester. Tucker Mouse had been watching the Bellinis and listening to what they say. Next to scrounging, eavesdropping on human beings was what he enjoyed most. That was one of the reasons he lived in the Times Square subway station. As soon as the family disappeared, he darted out across the floor and scooted up to the newsstand. At one side, the boards had separated, and there was a wide space he could jump through. He had been in a few times before, just exploring. For a moment, he stood under the three-legged stool, letting his eyes get used to the darkness. Then he jumped up on it. Psst, he whispered. Hey, you up there. Are you awake? There was no answer. Psst, psst. Tucker whispered again, louder this time. From the edge came a scuffling, like little feet feeling their way to the edge. Who is that? Said the voice. It's me, said Tucker, down here on the stool. A black head with two shiny black eyes peered down at him. Who are you? A mouse, said Tucker. Who are you? I'm Chester Cricket, said the cricket. He had a high musical voice. Everything he had said seemed to be spoken to an unheard melody. My name's Tucker, said Tucker Mouse. May I come up? I guess so, said Chester Cricket. This isn't my house anyway. Tucker jumped up beside the cricket and looked him over. A cricket, he said admiringly. So you are a cricket. I never saw one before. I've seen mice before, the cricket said. I knew quite a few back in Connecticut. Is that where you're from? Asked Tucker. Yes, said Chester. I guess I'll never see it again, he added wistfully. How did you get to New York? Asked Tucker Mouse. It's a long story, sighed the cricket. Tell me, said Tucker, settling back on his haunches. He loved to hear stories. It was almost as fun as eavesdropping, if the story was true. Well, it must have been 3 days ago, Chester Cricket began. I was sitting on top of my stump, just enjoying the weather and thinking how nice it was that summer had started. I live inside an old tree stump next to the willow tree, and I often go to the roof to look around. And I'd been practicing jumping that day too. On the other side of the stump from the willow tree, there's a brook that runs past. I'd been jumping back and forth to get my legs in condition for the summer. I do a lot of jumping, you know. Me too, said Tucker Mouse, especially around the rush hour. And I just finished jumping when I smelled something, Chester went on. Liverwurst, which I love. You like liverwurst? Tucker broke in. Wait, just wait. In one leap, he sprang all the way down from the shelf to the floor, dashed over to his drainpipe. Chester shook his head as he watched him go. He thought Tucker was a very excitable person, even for a mouse. Inside the drainpipe, Tucker's nest was a jumble of papers, scraps of cloth, buttons, lost jewelry, small change, and everything else that could be picked up in a subway station. Tucker tossed things left and right in a wild search. Neatness was not one of the things he aimed at in life. At last, he discovered what he was looking for: a piece of liverwurst he had found earlier that evening. It was meant to be for breakfast tomorrow, but he decided that meeting his first cricket was a special occasion. Holding the liverwurst between his teeth, he whisked back to the newsstand. Look, he said proudly, dropping the meat in front of Chester Cricket. Liverwurst, you continue the story. We'll enjoy a snack too. That's very nice of you, said Chester. He was touched that the mouse he had known only a few minutes would share his food with him. I had a little chocolate before, but besides that, nothing for 3 days. Eat, said Tucker. He bit the liverwurst into 2 pieces and gave Chester the bigger one. You smelled the liverwurst. Then what happened? I hopped down from the stump and went off towards the smell, said Chester. Very logical, said Tucker Mouse, munching with his cheese full. Exactly what I would have done. It was coming from a picnic basket, said Chester, a couple of tuffets away from my stump. The meadow begins, and there was a whole bunch of people having a picnic. They had hard boiled eggs, cold roast chicken, and roast beef, and a whole lot of other things beside liverwurst sandwiches, which I smelled. Tucker moaned with pleasure at the thought of all that food. They were having such a good time laughing and singing songs, they didn't notice me when I jumped into the picnic basket, continued Chester. I was sure they wouldn't mind if I had a taste. Naturally not, said Tucker Bow sympathetically. Why mind? Plenty for all. Who could blame you? Now I have to admit, Chester went on, I had more than a taste. As a matter of fact, I ate so much I couldn't keep my eyes open. What with being tired from the jumping and everything. And I fell asleep right there in the picnic basket. The first thing I know, somebody had put a bag on top of me that had the last of the roast beef sandwiches in it. I couldn't move. Imagine, Tucker exclaimed, trapped under roast beef sandwiches. Well, there are worse fates. At first, I was too afraid, said Chester. After all, I thought they probably came from New Canaan or some other nearby town. They'll have to unpack the basket sooner or later. Little did I know, he shook his head and sighed. I could feel the basket being carried into a car and riding somewhere and then be lifted down. That must have been the railroad station. Then I went up again, and there was a rattling and a roaring sound, the way a train makes. By this time, I was pretty scared. I knew every minute was taking me farther and farther from my stump, but there wasn't anything I could do. I was getting awfully cramped, too, under those roast beef sandwiches. Didn't you try to eat your way out? Asked Tucker. I didn't have room, said Chester, but every now and then the train would give a lurch, and I'd manage to free myself a little. We traveled on, and then the train stopped. I didn't have any idea where we were, but as soon as the basket was carried off, I could tell from the noise it must be New York. You never were here before? Tucker asked. Goodness, no, said Chester, but I've heard about it. There was a swallow I used to know who told about flying over New York every spring and fall on her way to the north and back. But what would I be doing here? He shifted uneasily from one set of legs to another. I'm a country cricket. Don't worry, said Tucker Mouse. I'll feed you liverwurst. You'll be all right. Go on with the story. It's almost over, said Chester. The people got off the train and walked a ways and got on another, even noisier than the first. Must have been the subway, said Tucker. I guess so, Chester Cricket said. You can imagine how scared I was. I didn't know where I was going. For all I knew, they could have been heading for Texas. Although I don't guess many people from Texas come all the way to Connecticut for a picnic. It could happen, said Tucker, nodding his head. Anyway, I worked furiously to get loose, and finally I made it. When they got off the second train, I took a flying leap and landed in a pile of dirt over in the corner of this place where we are. Such an introduction to New York, said Tucker, to land in a pile of dirt in Times Square Station. Tis, tis, tis. And here I am, Chester concluded forlornly. I've been lying over there for 3 days, not knowing what to do. At last, I got so nervous I began to chirp. That was the sound, interrupted Tucker Mouse. I heard it, but I didn't know what it was. Yes, that was me, said Chester. Usually I don't chirp until later on in the summer, but my goodness, I had to do something. The cricket had been sitting next to the edge of the shelf. For some reason, perhaps it was a faint noise like a padded feet tiptoeing across the floor. He happened to look down. A shadowy form that had been crouching silently below in the darkness made a spring and landed right next to Tucker and Chester. Watch out, Chester shouted. A cat! He dove head first into the matchbox. That's chapter 3. And here's our vocabulary words. Connecticut, a New England state, one of the original 13 colonies. New York, a noun. Mid-Atlantic state, one of the original 13 colonies, one of the British colonies that formed the United States, the largest city in New York State and in the United States. Texas, the second largest state, located in Southwest United States on the Gulf of Mexico. Basket. So you can make a basket when you're playing basketball, and it's also a container woven together with handles. And it's a horizontal loop for playing basketball, shooting it through. Chocolate, medium brown to dark brown color, food made from roasted cocoa beans. A beverage made from cocoa, powder, milk, and sugar, usually drunk hot. Corner. Corner is the intersection or where two streets cross each other. A solid exterior building formed by a cornerstone. An angle formed between two meeting walls. Cramp. A strip of metal with ends at right angles used to hold masonry together. A clamp for holding pieces of wood together while they are glued. A painful, involuntary muscular contraction. Crouch, the act of bending over with limbs close to the body, or to bend one's back forward from the waist down, to sit on one's heel. Dirt, not leveled or drained, unsuitable for all year travel, or the state of being covered with unclean things. Disgraceful gossip about the other lives of other people. So it is not the adjective, it is actually a noun here, and it's the garbage that's in the corner. Dove, any number of numerous small pigeons, an emblem of peace, someone who prefers negotiation to armed conflict in the conduct of foreign relations. Drain, emptying something being accomplished by allowing liquid to run out of it. A gradual depletion of energy, of resources, a pipe through which liquid is carried away. Forlorn, showing hopelessness. Furious, marked by extreme anger, as if showing violent anger marked by extreme and violent energy. Haunch, the loin or the last part of the leg, the hip or the upper thigh in a human being. Liverwurst is ground liver. Loose, not bound or fastened together. It's not dense, structured, or arrangement, not in possession or in control of any player. Lurch, unsteady, uneven gait, the act of moving forward suddenly, abrupt, up and down. Manage, to be in charge of, dispose. Be successful, to achieve a goal. Nervous, easily agitated or relating to the nervous system, unpredictably excitable, especially of horses. Picnic, any informal meal eaten outside or an excursion, any undertaking that is easy to do, a day devoted to outdoor social gathering. Pipe, a long tube made of metal or plastic that is used to carry oil, water, gas, a tube with a small bowl at one end used for smoking tobacco. A small thimble flute that is played on the left hand, with the right hand is free to beat the tabor. Roar, the sound made by a lion, a very loud utterance, the sound of an animal, a deep, prolonged, loud noise. Silence, having frequently below or above average of the human audibility, not to make a sound, marked by absence of sound. Stump, any of three wooden posts that form the wicket, the part of a limb or tooth that remains after the rest is removed, the base part of a tree. So that's the third definition, is what we're talking about where Chester was on the stump. The base part of a tree that remains standing after the tree has fallen. Summer is the warmest season of the year. In the northern hemisphere, it extends from the summer solstice to the autumn equinox. Or verb, spend. To summer is to spend your summer doing something. Tiptoe, walking on the toes on one's toes, is to make no noise. Okay, and those are our vocabulary words. Here is the writing prompt at the beginning. What story does Chester Cricket tell Mario? So these themes are life changes, new experiences, country life versus city life, friends and friendships. So if you would like to write an essay, you can do a 200-word story on the story that Chester Cricket tells Tucker Mouse. You can also talk about the theme of life changes, new experiences, a country mouse going to the city, a city mouse going to the country, friends and relations. So I hope you like it. Leave a comment. I would love to see Any essays that you might have or might have done, or your children might have done.